Camion, Program Assistant. We have a quorum and we'll be exiting practice mode, so anything you say from this point forward will be recorded.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of the UAC on Pi Day, March 14th. Thank you all for being here. We'll start with a roll call, starting with Commissioner Phillips online.
Present.
And then we'll go
Present.
Commissioner Metz.
Present.
Commissioner Croft present.
And Commissioner Siegel, and the four of us are here and we have a quorum. We do have a few changes to the agenda that went out, mostly because of just the format of the agenda. So there are no minutes to approve, and there will not be a director report. And we will not be talking about future topics for upcoming meetings. And with that, I'll ask if there are any comments from the public not on items on the agenda.
This is Janelle Camion, Program Assistant. If anyone from the public would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand or dial *9 on your phone. No hands raised.
Great, thanks. Then we'll turn to the new business, which is about the CLEAN program rules and requirements, and ask if there are any public comments on that.
This is Janelle Camion, Program Assistant. If anyone from the public would like to speak on item number 1, please raise your hand or dial *9 on your phone. No hands raised.
Great, thanks. And we'll turn to Director Batchelor.
Evening, Chair Siegel, Commissioners. First of all, thank you very much for taking this time. I know you have much busy items, but we do appreciate having you spend a little bit of time on this item with us tonight. We are asking, this is an action item that we want to move forward to council. So we will ask for a vote at the end of the time. We do not have a presentation for this, but I do have Senior Resource Planner Jim Stack, who will be going over the report itself. I've had some conversations with some of you. Most of the topics that I heard were around the extension from 1 year to 3 years on this program, as well as the rate change on this item. And there might be more, but those were the two main topics from you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jim Stack.
Thanks very much, and good evening, Commissioners. It's nice to be with you. Can you all hear me right now? Great. So as Director Batchelor mentioned, there's no presentation tonight. That's because this is a pretty couple of small changes we're presenting to you tonight. The first is a small and very narrowly tailored rule change, and then the second is kind of a small and very routine update to the contract rate. I'll get into in more detail shortly. So just as background on the Palo Alto CLEAN program, it was adopted in 2012 by Council. This is what's known as a feed-in tariff program, and it's eligible. It's open to all renewable energy resources that are physically located within Palo Alto city limits and interconnected to our distribution system. A feed-in tariff program is one where you essentially adopt a standard contract, a standard form, and put it out there in the public, and any developer who has a project that's eligible can sign on to that contract and begin selling power to you. This kind of expedites the process. You don't have to sit down and negotiate deal by deal with different developers. Another thing I mentioned is this program is different from our net energy metering programs in that under CLEAN, we purchase all of the energy that the generators produce. So none of that energy is used on site by the customer hosting the project. It's all fed right into the distribution system, and it goes out to all of our customers. And then, let's see, the program's participation cap and contract price have been adjusted a handful of times since 2012 when it was adopted. The last kind of significant change to the program was in 2015 when participation in the program was opened up. It used to just be for solar resources. Now it's open to non-solar resources in Palo Alto as well. In 2017, council added a 15-year contract term option to the program and made some slight adjustments to the avoided cost rates, which I'll explain in a minute. In terms of where the program is currently, right now we have 6 projects that participate in the program. They are all solar projects and they're all located on parking structures or on parking lots in the city, including 4 on city-owned parking structures. All 6 contracts or all 6 projects came online between 2016 and 2019. And altogether, they account for 2.84 megawatts of generating capacity. The current contract rate for solar resources is 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and that rate is available until we reach a cap of 3 megawatts of program participation. So we're currently at 2.84 megawatts, which means that we only have 160 kilowatts left under that 16.5 cent rate. After we reach the 3 megawatt cap, the rate gets adjusted down to our utilities avoided cost for that energy, which under the current program structure is about 9 cents. And we're going to propose updating that tonight just slightly. The contract rate that's available to non-solar renewable energy resources in Palo Alto is just the avoided cost rate for those resources, which is slightly lower. It's about between 8 and 8.5 cents, depending on the contract term that's selected at this point in time. And at this point in time, we have no projects participating other than the 6 solar projects. So the other thing to mention that we are going to talk about adjusting here is that under the program rules, currently participating projects are required to come online and start producing power within a year when they sign the contract with us. And the reason we have that rule in place is to avoid having projects sign contracts and kind of occupy space in that participation queue, but never come to fruition. So this way, if there's a project that signs a contract with us and they have some trouble, getting financing or building the project, and it's not going to happen, we can get that space kind of in the program queue freed up, and it can be used by another project that will hopefully be more successful. So that's the reason for that 1-year development timeline requirement. So as I mentioned at the top, we have a couple of changes to make. One is to adjust that project completion timeline requirement that I just mentioned from 1 year to 3 years. But that change would only apply to affordable housing projects in Palo Alto. What we've come to understand after having some conversations with developers, including the customer who is developing an affordable housing project and proposed this change to us, is that a 1-year construction timeline and permitting timeline for projects, it works really well for projects that are being built on parking lots or parking structures where there's not a whole lot of permitting steps to go through. It's relatively quick and easy to get those projects built. But that timeline is just not feasible for a project that's on a newly built building in Palo Alto. If you're going to put it on the roof of the building, it just takes much longer to go through the permitting process and the construction process for such a thing. So the 1-year time requirement just isn't feasible for these types of projects. And since this change would really only be material for projects that are underneath the 3 megawatt participation cap that would get that higher 16.5 cent rate, we're really only talking about a small number of projects that this might impact. So that's the first change that we're proposing. The second is the more routine update of the avoided cost rates, which are available to solar resources after we reach the 3 megawatt participation cap, and then to non-solar resources. So the current avoided cost rates for solar resources are between 8.8 and 9.1 cents, depending on contract term, and we're proposing to bump those up slightly to 9.5 to 10.2 cents. And for non-solar, the current rates are between 8.3 and 8.5 cents, and the proposal is to bump those up to 9.4 to 10.1 cents. As I mentioned earlier, we haven't adjusted these rates since, I think, 2017. And since that time, what we've seen is renewable energy costs have come down, but the costs of capacity and transmission have gone way up. And that's slightly offset the reduction in renewable energy costs. That's why we're seeing a slight increase in what we estimate as the avoided cost of the utility of having to purchase power from outside city. So that's my summary of the changes that we're proposing. That's really all I have at this point. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about these changes.
I guess I just have one, which is I like learning about this program, and I think it's great that we would have some local generation. Do we have any sense for how many people we're kind of waiting for this? How many projects?
Yeah, I think in the past several years, we've really only had conversations about the program with one customer. As I mentioned, the last project that signed a contract and came online was about 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, so in 2019. And since then, we've had some occasional inquiries, but nothing too serious until we got this question from the customer who seems very interested in, he's developing an affordable housing, multifamily residential construction project on, I think it's on El Camino. And he'd like to install a 50 kilowatt solar system on this development. Yeah, so there's still room under the 3 megawatt program cap for that project, and for a couple other ones of that size. But there's not a whole lot of capacity available, and we haven't had too many other customers come knock on our door in recent years.
I have one more question. So when given the choice between this program and I forget what the other one, net metering is, where you can use it yourself, what is kind of the trade-off between one or the other? Is it that these people, it's easier for them to do the clean program where they're just, all the energy is coming to the utility than it is to do net metering? Or I'm just kind of curious, like, why choose one versus the other?
I think it usually comes down to a distinction between in terms of size. So the smaller projects, they tend to prefer net metering. Usually the size of the project is usually kind of roughly sized to the building's load. In which case, if it kind of matches up and they're not generating too much excess power, then they can avoid the utility rate. And so that works out pretty well for them. They've kind of insurance against rate increases in the future. And they also don't have to deal with signing a power purchase agreement and having their lawyers look at that and deal with the interconnection agreement and other sort of bureaucratic headaches of signing a power purchase agreement. For larger projects, if it's something that's in the hundreds of kilowatts to over a megawatt, that type of capacity is usually in excess of what the customers might consume on site, so that they, I guess, find it more worthwhile to sign a contract to sell it to us. Also, if they sell it to us under the clean program, then they can't claim that they are solar powered on site. So maybe some customers like to be able to say that about the project, that they're actually using the solar that they generate, rather than just kind of hosting a facility on their site that provides power to the city.
Thanks. That's interesting.
Commissioner Phillips? Actually, before you go, I'm sorry, I see your hand we have one public comment. Why don't we go forward with that first?
Jason Matloff, you may speak.
Yeah, hi, thank you very much. Thanks, Jim, for taking this forward. I thought I'd raise my hand to answer the question. specifically the last question. So the problem is that Palo Alto does not have a solution for virtual net for multi-tenant buildings where you have renters and this gap in economics between the renters who don't own the building, who would otherwise pay the utilities, and the landlord who owns the building and has the capital, but no incentive because they don't use nor pay for the utilities. All of the districts IOUs have the concept of virtual net metering, which allows the landlord, the person who owns the assets to pass through the costs and charge the tenants for the electricity. We don't have that given the size of our utility. We started with this process, as Jim can probably speak to, asking the Palo Alto Utility District if they could do a net metering. This is an enormous problem. We have half of the residents in Palo Alto live in rentals, and there is no solution for a landlord to provide renewable energy on the building where they live because there's no economic way to make it happen. So this is the only way, is to provide, basically it's like two ships in the night. I'll provide renewable energy on the rooftop, and the only way that we can get compensated for that is through this clean program, which effectively it's a wash, right? Instead of the tenant paying, they use standard electricity from the grid. I provide renewable electricity to the grid, and it's kind of ships in the night, but it achieves the same end that the city wants, which is to have net zero emissions and 100% renewable energy by X year. I can't remember what year it is. So it's critically important with all the housing that we're building in Palo Alto. I'm sure you all know about the 6,000 new housing units that have to be built. If we don't do this, and by the way, not just for the last half a megawatt that's available, but more whole scale, there's going to be no mechanism for those 6,000 new housing units to have renewable energy. So I really urge that not only do we address this problem more immediately, but also solve a solution for the other 5,550 units. But one important part that I think Jim mentioned that I really want to hammer on is building in Palo Alto is extremely arduous. It takes many years from concept through entitlement, through rezoning, through construction documents and permitting before you even get to construction. So there's no possible way that we can sign up for building solar if there's a 12-month reservation period. And that's why I very much appreciate Jim and team and your attention to this. And I appreciate that. So I will stop unless there's further questions.
Thank you. That was helpful. Commissioner Phillips?
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of looking at I'm not sure how many motions we would potentially be putting into play here. Looking at the avoided cost calculation, I'm assuming that's just a mathematical calculation and update, which I would have no particular opinion on, except I presume you got it right. Looking at the program as a whole, I guess what I would wonder is, it seems like it's a 7 cents per kilowatt hour for the people who get in under the 3 megawatt subsidy paid by the ratepayers to these people. Is that in essence correct? And that was the intent of the council as far as we can reconstruct it?
I think that's a good way to describe the cost differential. I think our legal folks would have qualms about using the S word, subsidy, but yeah, that's effectively it.
I mean, given that was the intention of the council, and given that the 3 megawatts still seems to hold, I don't see any reason not to support the extension for the 3 years, given for the low cost housing, given the facts, which I think people do realize that it does take a lot longer there. I guess I don't see much controversy once you've accepted the point that, again, I'm not a lawyer, that, there is the difference between the 16 cents and the actual avoided cost. I guess the point is nobody would do this at avoided cost with these 15, 20, 25-year contracts. Is that the kind of the sense? Nobody did it at 14 cents. So it's likely to say nobody's going to do it at less than 10 cents.
I think that's fair to say. It's pretty unlikely in current conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to interject here, but one thing I haven't heard you talk about, and this is sort of following up on Commissioner Phillips, is the benefit of the resource adequacy and what our requirement is, and whether that is part of the value that's calculated in the what we're paying customers. So it's not just the avoided costs of the energy, but we have this other requirement and benefit, and if that's part of the value.
That's right. Yeah, that is part of the overall value that we calculate. For a project of this size, it's unlikely that they would, go through the California Independent System Operator process to actually become a resource that qualifies as providing resource adequacy to us. But to the extent that they, reduce our usage of energy from the grid, it does reduce our need to purchase. It reduces our requirement to purchase RA from other facilities. So that calculation is part of the avoided cost estimate.
So I guess I just wanted to get a short sense of the economics. So if you have like 1,000 square foot rooftop, and how much kilowatts can you actually generate off of that? Any idea? I mean, is there a number like?
7.
So it's really small, right? So on something like that, you're definitely not looking at doing this, right? I mean, you probably need what? How big a rooftop before this makes sense for people?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that, but we've seen the typical projects that we've had participate has been at least 100 kilowatts.
So, but to 100 kilowatts, how big is the rooftop? I'm just really what I'm trying to, that'd be fine if you know.
I think a typical residential system is in the order of like 5 to 7 kilowatts. So maybe so 15 or 20 times, so 15 or 20,000 square feet, maybe.
So it's really a large parking garage, right?
Right.
And the big ones I've seen are the ones on Cal Ave, right? I mean, you have the.
Right. Yeah, there are 2 there on Cal Ave, and then there are 2 in the university area on Bryant and Webster.
But no private, as any private person, like in the research park or anywhere, I mean, they have big rooftops there. I was just thinking about where there are big rooftops.
Yeah, we don't have any other folks who have done them on rooftops. The biggest one we have in the program is in the research park at off Page Mill with a parking lot, canopy structure.
All right, thanks.
Yep. Hi, Jim. I had a few questions. I did one clarification. The price includes value of the RECs, correct? We get the renewable attributes. Okay.
Yes.
And I read paragraph D4, but I'm not sure I understood it. The system has to be located in Palo Alto, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I didn't see anywhere it said that. And do we impute a, resilience, reliability value? Kind of similar to what I think some of the other commissioners were asking.
That's really difficult to quantify, so that doesn't really go into the avoided costs calculator. But I think that factor is kind of part of the justification for the 16.5 cent rate that council adopted a long time ago.
For the first 3 megawatts, right? Okay. And so it sounded like we're not expecting more projects really beyond like 50 kilowatts, right?
I can never say for sure, but yeah, I'm not. I haven't heard about any that are.
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not. Is there any thought to really, not for discussion tonight, but thought to really revamping the program, since we really haven't had much interest in it, it sounds like. I mean, we have all these tiers that there are 0 participants in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there any thought that maybe we should change this a lot so that more folks want to be involved?
Until Mr. Matloff came to us recently, we hadn't heard any, kind of clamoring from the public or developers for doing such a thing. So that hasn't been something that we proposed.
Okay.
Thought about.
Okay, so that we're not planning to do that then.
It's not on our agenda right now.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Are there other large solar projects that aren't in this program that we could get into this program? So for example, I remember, 5 years ago or longer, huge solar arrays popped up at a whole bunch of the schools, and I don't know what's going on. What are those part of? Where does that energy go?
I'm not quite sure. I would guess they're in the net metering program, but I don't know those specifically.
But if it's within Palo Alto, if they're within Palo Alto, would they by necessity have to be in one or the other?
Yeah, I guess so, unless, I can't think of any reason they wouldn't participate in one program or the other.
I mean, I guess unless they were completely off the grid and had a big battery storage
I
facility
mean,
in
it's
their
public
garage.
schools. It's like, Escondido has it, Nixon has it, JLS has it. They all have these very large overhang, it's takes up a big part of the field where they've put in a lot of solar. And I was just kind of curious where that's going. I know I've seen a lot of schools in other cities too. I don't know what they do with it.
While you're doing that, I just had a couple little comments on this, not on the pricing, but one of the changes on page 4 is to cut out the UAC on the review, and I didn't really understand what the thought process behind that was.
Well, let's take a motion to get rid of that.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to not cut out the UAC, but maybe you have some explanation that I'm missing.
Are you referring to the report, the staff report?
Well, no, I mean, this is in the changes that are proposed in the handbook on page 4 of 14. So it's in the packet. It's page 8 of the packet, I believe, and page 4 of the changes. And the proposal is to eliminate UAC review and change annual to regular basis for city council to review the program, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
It's just below the pricing changes on the program overview page.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, just we hadn't taken this to council or UAC in quite a while, so I thought we could just change that to it seemed like less frequent oversight was acceptable to everybody. So that was the reason.
So are you telling us staff will be fine with putting back in city council and utilities advisory commission, and that'll be the staff recommendation?
Yes, we can do that. I think, I think the thing is that when we first put this in, and the reason why this didn't come to the UAC is that when this program was first established, portion of it was a direction from the council. And the dollar amounts that we took back to them, as Jim mentioned, when we established this program was directly through council. we did in the past, we did not take this to the UAC, but I thought it was important after having more conversation with staff that, you know, that you should have some oversight, since it is having utilities perspective on this, that we should bring this back if we're going to make any kind of future changes to this program or any of the other programs that we have.
Seems to me when you're changing rates, it's helpful to have have it run by the UAC. And I mean, you're getting feedback here about rates. So I would personally prefer to not cut out the UAC. I'm getting a lot of nods over here. So when we get to a motion, if that's possible to amend it like that, that looks like that may be the proposal. And then other comment, I just happened to click on the wrong page, which was the insurance page, which is everybody's favorite topic. And this is not unique to this program, but I just think our insurance minimums are way too low for the city. So that's not a UAC matter. I'll just throw it out there. They just seem $1 million per occurrence for a city just seems way too under, like that's asking way too little from our contractors. So that's, I don't know, it's neither here nor there because I think it's a standard, but it is in this agreement. Yeah, were there any other, oh, and I had one other question, which is also on the permitting, there's this discussion about how many megabits that can be sent at one time. And I'm just wondering if that's something that becomes a problem, if it slows down permitting. I don't even know if we would know because so few applicants have come through for this program. But if you've seen it in others where just that physical limitation, if it's ever been a problem.
Sorry, not sure I understand.
Okay,
Which
sorry.
one?
I actually read the whole thing through and there's all this discussion, not all, but there's a lot of discussion about the timing of applicants. And I guess if you got to a point where there's almost nothing left in the first tier and you want to make sure when people are hurrying to get in, that made sense to me. But one of the limitations, which is also factored into the timing, is that applicants can only submit 10 megabits at a time of their permit. And so if it's more than that, to do it in pieces. And I just didn't know if that is a problem and if it's a problem generally for permit applications where what the city's able to receive in a single email, which is the required application process to come through email, if that becomes a barrier for anything.
Yeah, I'm not sure what our IT cap on email side is at this point, but I know when we adopted the program in 2012, we were anticipating there could be, a big rush of developers to get in, and we might be trying to sort between, emails coming in and their timestamps and so forth in terms of allocating the queue, which obviously didn't end up happening. But yeah, we had some discussions about how to, make sure the process was efficient and fair to everybody. It's probably
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, that all made sense to me and maybe we'll be lucky and all that timing discussion will matter at one point. It was more of a meta question about if that is one of the barriers to permitting. But I'll follow up on my own. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I don't know if it's on top for what the agenda is tonight, but it seems like not much is happening in this program, right? So it seems like it'd be valuable to have somebody look at what could be done to really turbocharge renewables within the city of Palo Alto.
So I think Commissioner Phillips was correct when he said it's a subsidy. And that's why the council limited it to 3 megawatts. I mean, from an efficiency point of view, it's much better to have the big solar farms. I mean, staff can comment on that too. There's not a strong argument of why you would have build a lot of solar at 16 cents in the city of Palo Alto. I mean, it's a subsidy. It costs the ratepayer money. So it's not something you'd want to turbocharge.
And I would second that I support these changes in general, possibly with some amendments, because it clearly reflects the view of the council back when they adopted this program. I think the tweak to make it, to the avoided costs is an accounting exercise. The tweak to make it 3 years is quite reasonable. And then presumably with one more program, the 3 megawatts is used up, and this program is essentially moot for the future, is my understanding. If we were going to do another program, I would want to review from basic principles why and how do we want to subsidize, and to what extent and through what mechanism, local renewable resources, and think that through. And I don't think this program is necessarily the vehicle or the best vehicle or the right vehicle for doing that. And I think that's a fairly substantial effort, and I think it's something the council would need to be involved in pretty closely as well.
And as I recall, Dean, maybe, I don't know, was it 3, 4, 5, who knows how many years ago, we at UAC, we talked about, some customers had a desire to have local renewable energy. And when there was some research into it, as I recall, and it's just because land is so expensive here and there aren't a lot of obvious places to put it, back to Vice Chair Sharp's comment, it's just not an efficient way to go about generating renewable energy. We're better off doing it far away and transmitting it. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. So yeah, that was part of it. And I think the other thing what we looked at was just from a cost perspective, because storage at the time was so expensive. Now, I have had some conversation recently with Jonathan Abendschein. He and I have talked many times about looking at some local generation from solar and doing something we were looking at a project, possibly doing something at the airport on the runway areas, with putting panels down off to the side, and then also using the golf course parking lot and put some canopy up. It won't be super large, but we did look at some space through the airport and next door to the golf course, and then locating some storage off to the side of the golf course area. So that is still, now we're starting to relook at that again to see what kind of options and what kind of grants that we might be able to apply for.
Right. I think that's the main point, that technology has changed dramatically, particularly in storage, since this program was designed. And therefore looking at energy that's perhaps generated locally, which also meets our RA requirement and also, provides revenue from RECs. I think relooking at that is probably worth doing in face of that. Maybe, and it's not in this program, so that's why I'm just asking a question. Is it on topic for tonight, or is that a separate thing?
I just speak for myself. I believe that should be a separate topic, and we should come back to you with some different ideas. I mean, the other thing is that, you save off the transmission cost, of course. And since transmission costs are rising so high, anything that we can do from an internal standpoint in city property is definitely an advantage to us.
Yeah, you cut transmission, you get the tier 1, bucket 1 REC value. You increase RA, you have increased reliability and resilience. So I think there's a lot of benefits that increasingly could be quantified.
Okay. Commissioner Phillips, did you have your hand raised?
No, maybe I was just, you were talking about the rising transmission costs. I assume those were included in the avoided cost calculation of around 9 cents, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
they are.
Yes.
So that's not something that's not included. Good, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Any other question? Great. I think we can probably vote, and I think I'd like a motion that accepts all changes except the deletion of the Utilities Advisory Commission.
Does that, just clarification, does that include the change from about annually to regularly?
Yeah, so that change, unless anyone has would prefer not to say regularly, I think the goal was to not impose such a precise requirement, but to leave that change, but just to add, or to include the UAC still, so not to delete the UAC. So,
Are we ready for a motion?
yeah, I think we are.
I can motion to accept the changes with the exception of the change deleting the review of the UAC. So we
I'll
would-
second.
Great, and I'll start with you, Commissioner Phillips.
In favor.
Yes.
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 And yes, from me as well. Great, so the motion carries with the one change. Thank you all. I think we are done with our meeting. Anyone move to adjourn?
No, let's stay here.
We can wave. Thank you, Commissioner Phillips, for showing up online, and all of you for coming in. See you in
Thank-
April.
Bye.
Thank you.